Hi, in this tutorial, we're going to continue from where we left off with functions, and now we're going to talk about having a return statement in a function. Before I do so, I just want to make a quick comment on the fact that when we did the last one and we talked about having parameters in functions, keep in mind that your function can have more than one parameter if needed. So, for example, if I wanted to generate random numbers instead of getting numbers from the boxes up here, I could instead say that I could dump this, and here I'm just going to bring in the symbol and the two numbers. So num1, num2. So this would be a function now that has three parameters instead of just one. Now, we're going to change this up a little bit, and because our function takes in two numbers, does a math problem with them, and then when it's done, it gets an answer. So we're going to have it return that answer to the main program. So in our function menu, there is a return statement. So at the end of our function, and this is really important that should be like the last thing in the function, it's going to return whatever we want to give back. Well, we want to give back the answer. So we're going to return the variable answer to the main program. So now, when we go to call the function up here, we know that we want this to print out. So we got to remember that when we call this function, it's actually going to be returning something. So I can set it equal to a variable when I return something. So I'm going to just show you a couple different ways to do it. One way to do it would be to set the variable, say, x, and we'll have it then call this function do problem. And we're going to give it a plus sign, right? But we need to now give it three parameters. And just so that it now will do random numbers, we're going to give it a random number from 1 to 9 and another random number from 1 to 9. So now every time I run it, it's going to get just any random number from 1 to 9 and do the problem with that. Now, if we do it this way, whatever the function returns, we've stored that now in variable x. So if we want to see what we stored, then I would still have to do, like, say, a set text, and then I think it was called output label with x in it. So now if I run this, and the only one I have working right now is the plus button, you can see that every time I hit the plus button, it does give me additional problem with random numbers. The other way to do this would be a little bit shorter, a little less code, same idea, but instead of actually storing it as a variable, I can just go ahead and send it right to setText without storing it first. So I could instead write in my setText, I can say set the text of the output label to whatever I get when I call the function do problem. And this time I'm giving it a minus. And then remember that I have to give it three values when I call it. And again, random number 1 to 9. And another random number 1 to 9. So now when I run it, when I hit the plus sign, it works. When I hit the minus sign, it looks like it works the same. I'm just getting rid of the step where I stored it as a variable up here. So in the add button, I stored it as a variable first and then printed that. The minus button, I just went ahead and put it right in the output. One last thing I just kind of want to mention as we're going through this, if I go to do the multiply button and I go to output label and I give it call to the function, and it's called do problem. And let's say I give it a multiply. And then let's say I just run it now and I hit the multiply button. You're going to see that obviously when I run it now, it says undefined times undefined equals NaN, which it's not running correctly. And the reason it's not running correctly is because the function expected you to give it a symbol and two numbers. And in order for the function to work correctly, it needs that. And so if I try to call the function without giving it all the correct values, it's not going to work correctly. So just remember that as you do that, you would also have to add the random number 1 to 9 for each of those. So I'll go ahead and add those in. So I get a random number 1 to 9 for here, and another random number from 1 to 9 for here. And I just chose 1 to 9. It could have been anything we wanted, right? And so now all three should be working properly. And so just as a summary, when we create functions, if we want to be able to use the same function, but it works a little bit differently each time depending on, you know, what it's called with, I'm going to add parameters to my function. If the function is intended to do something and give back a value, then I want to get in the habit of using a return statement at the end of the function and returning that value back up. So that's a quick summary of functions with return.